April 14th, 2021. I'm interviewing Pat Cull. So thank you for being part of the BE collection with the first question of where were you born?
Right. Yeah, I was born in Chicago, and my family lived there for the first 10 years of my life. And then we moved to as a suburb, but there were cornfields. I mean, it was like this was like, we moved in 1952, so it was in the middle of all that, going to the suburbs. That's what they did. They built their own house, and that is truly that. They let me nail down the kitchen floor, which was going to be covered with linoleum anyway, so it didn't matter if I banged it all up. So that was my first experience with my later career. And
where in Chicago were you born? I'm from Chicago too.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yeah.
Right.
The hospital? I used to know that, but I can't remember it.
And you lived in Oak Park?
No. In the city.
In the city. Okay. I lived on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, we were kind of the south side, but not too far south. And I do remember 1239 South California. That was one of the addresses.
It's amazing how those things stick with you.
Yeah.
And where were you? Do you have siblings?
I have one brother who's 4 years younger than me, and he's still in that area.
Really? Huh.
Mm-hmm.
So then how long did you stay in the area? How did you end up to where you are today?
I moved around quite a bit. I went to college in Illinois at a state college, and kind of worked my parents were factory workers, and I worked in factories every possible vacation. And we had an arrangement. My parents would pay for the first semester, and I would pay for the second. And it was a stretch for them, and it was a stretch for me. And then I went to Michigan State and didn't like. I went into college as a PE major, but I switched over to psych, which is so very useful. So very useful.
Right.
And right. And then I went to Michigan State to be a college counselor, and I didn't like the program, and I didn't the people in it. All the men were all jocks and stuff, and I was like, I don't think I want to be in this profession. So I left there, and then I was a assistant dean of students, which meant a residence hall person.
Where was that?
And that was first. I went to Michigan State, and I worked in residence hall there, and then the other was in upstate New York, in Geneseo. There's a little college there, little town. At that time, it was like, the bank was on Bank Street, and the Main Street was the main street, like that. It was really small town, except for the college. And after that, where did I go? After that, I went when I was at Michigan State. Now I had known since I was 10 that I was a lesbian, and I was terrified, just terrified of it. My parents.
What made you aware of it when you were 10? Was there a moment?
Well, the real defining moment. I mean, I knew that I was really drawn to girls all the time, and some of the other parents, like at one time I was, roughhousing with their daughter, and they were like, you can't see her, you can't do that. It's like there. So there was something about me, even that young. I think I was pretty butch that young. So I think a lot of people knew, but I didn't. I was afraid. I was really afraid of it. And
it's hard to have a word for it when you're 10.
Well, no, because the defining moment, a real defining moment for me was I used to go into the little drugstore and, kind of try to hide out by the magazines, and I would read like True Love and stuff like that. And I read a story about this girl who she and her father knew, and they'd talk about being attracted to the same women and stuff like that. And I thought, oh my God, that's what I am, you know.
Really?
And so that was sort of a real defining moment.
How old were you then?
10.
10. That's amazing that that was even in print.
That was even what?
In print.
Oh yeah. Well, it was not a good article for sure. And my parents were sort of the Archie Bunker, you know, about, you know, queer as a $3 bill and, you know, stuff like that. So they were definitely, you know, really anti. So
when you worked you worked in the factory, what kind of work did you do there?
Oh, just I did everything from sand screens to putting the middle, you know, in TV tubes, how they used to have the prongs. I worked in a factory where I put the middle prong in. I mean, I worked, you know, scrolling, you know, those metal Christmas trees. I would do that. You know, just anything.
And you were in high school then?
Yes. And then college. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So did you have a relationship with a woman when you were younger, or?
Oh, no.
No.
I mean, friends, you know, I was really attracted to friends. And then, of course, in high school, you know, I ended up really being madly in love with somebody there, you know. So, but, you know, at one point she even said, gosh, it's too bad you're not a boy because we'd be perfect together. I'm like, oh. She's totally straight. I'm still in touch with her.
Are you? Do you bring that conversation up?
I have.
Was there any issue with your sexuality that was present?
Well, what started happening when I was in New York, I really was isolated, you know, because this town was so little. And so there was a woman that I had known at Michigan State, and we made an agreement that whoever she was going somewhere else and I was going somewhere else. So we made an agreement that we would get together at Thanksgiving, whichever of us had the best thing. And so I said, I did not have the best, the most ideal situation. So I went to visit her. And
where does she live?
She was in Baltimore. So I went to Baltimore, and she said, oh yeah, I go to these lesbian bars because then the men don't bother you. And so, you know, so that's the first time she took me to the first lesbian bar I ever went to, and some guy called in and said, hey, Butch, to me. And I'm like, I don't know what he was talking about. But this whole group of women just kind of rose up and, you know. Good. So I hung out with them. I went to Baltimore as often as possible while I lived in New York. And then I moved to Baltimore, but that didn't really work. I didn't really. I ended up hanging out with that woman that I went to see. She had left. She'd left Baltimore, and her lover and I hung out together a lot. And I said, you know, I don't want to stay here. I don't know where to go, but I don't want to stay here. And she said, oh, I'd like to leave too. So we decided temporarily we would go to Chicago, and we ended up getting involved. We'd never dated. We just went driving off somewhere and ended up getting involved. And that relationship.
Did you continue that relationship?
Yeah. We about 6 years. And then
that's quite an involvement.
We left and we went to Seattle. I have to think the chronology. We went to Seattle, and that's when I went to graduate school. And she was a psychiatric nurse. So when we lived in Chicago, I ended up working at the state hospital for several years as a social worker.
What was as a social worker? Huh?
Yeah, because I'd called them up and I said, you know, I got a degree.
So what year was that?
69, because I was in school from 69 to 71. And
Then you were a psychiatric social worker?
yeah, but I ended up
Huh?
working with two different jobs I had there. One was working with men who had been committed for criminal behavior, and some of them were
Oh.
there long term, like they were murderers and stuff like that. That had been long, stuff like that. They'd been incarcerated a long time, and they were fine. And then also we would get people off the street, the cops had picked up, and they thought they were psychiatric cases, and so I would work that up. And
Did you find that job interesting? Did you like that?
yeah, it was an interesting job. It was.
Sounds challenging.
Yeah, well, it was really just getting information about them and their families and what kind of placements they had, if any, but I was working with some people that I liked, and we were in this tiny office. It was kind of fun time. Went to school and got my master's in social work. And during that time, I was interning as in a children's facility. After a while, I just felt like I didn't know what I was doing, and it's like it was such a powerful place to be, to make decisions about these kids and where they're going to live, and you're going to take them out of the home, put them back into an abusive home, stuff like that. And the kids themselves all started to sound alike. I want to go home. I want to go home. It's just,
Right.
And anyway, some stuff about me being a lesbian came up. So I stayed a year longer and recorded everything to make sure, I was protected.
Really? What kind of stuff came up?
Well, I had been closeted all that time. And then there was a kid who came from Western Washington, that is a really small town, and she wanted to be a boy. And this was not.
She confided in you? Was that something she confided?
Yeah, I'd heard. Yes. And the people were talking about just taking her to a doctor so she could do this. Now, she had never even been a lesbian. She liked girls, so she figured she must be a boy.
I see.
So
How old was she?
I came. She was probably 14.
Wow.
Something like that. So I came out to the staff. We'd have these staff meetings, and I came out to them and set her up, the kid up, with some people in the community so she could explore that. And I think that all went well. And then something else came up about foster care. I don't know. I got into a disagreement with the administration. So anyway, so I stayed there a year longer. And then after that,
What happened to her? What happened to the child?
Oh, I think she was fine. She just went out into the community. I think she got into a foster care. I think she was fine. And when I was in Seattle, I had come to visit a friend in Palo Alto. Anyway, we moved to California. Oh yes, I do remember. I was with another social worker.
As a lover or just a partner?
Yeah. And so I thought I had a job. We had come to visit, and while we were here, I thought the woman that we were visiting was also a social worker, and she said, "Well, they need people here." It was in San Mateo County, and so I went and interviewed, and they said, "You're perfect. If you score it, we're giving the test for social work. If you come up in the top 3, the job is yours."
Really?
And I came in number 2. And so I thought, well, I've got a job, and planned on moving out to California. And by the time I got here, somewhere along the way, they said, "Oh no," they'd heard from the previous place that I had worked.
Oh, really?
That found out that I was a lesbian, and said, "Oh no, this wouldn't work at all, because when you're interviewing men, we need to have an appropriate female
Really, really. That's it. I
Yeah,
haven't heard that
that's
expression.
really what they
Right.
said. Yeah, yeah.
Appropriate
That
for
I
you.
wouldn't be able to work with the men because I wasn't,
We're inappropriate. Right.
yes, I was
There you go.
inappropriate.
Right.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So I
Interesting.
didn't have that job. And
No.
then and we had moved out here. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll look into something else.
Uh,
I don't know if I want to be a social worker anyway. And
right.
so I started looking around at apprenticeships,
Mhm.
a little booklet. And there was a group, they weren't called Women in Apprenticeship at the time, but they ended up being that. Anyway, I went to this organization and I said, well, you know,
I'm an
that's where
inappropriate female.
that's where I sat with their book of like 300 apprenticeships, and I said, no, I think I just really want to be a carpenter. And they said, okay, well, this is what you have to do, and this is how you dress and how you go onto the job site, who you ask for.
How were you supposed to dress then?
Oh, just in jeans, probably just the way I was, Don't wear anything inappropriate, which of course I never would,
So then you became a carpenter.
Yeah, that was kind of a tricky thing to do, because I knew that they were going to go on strike. Carpenters were going to on strike the following week. I mean, a week away. And so, like on a Monday, I went to all these job sites and caused such a fuss because there weren't any women carpenters at the time.
At all. Were you in the union? Were you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to get the job first.
And then you can.
Yeah. So I couldn't find a job, and I was going to be 32 after the strike, and they had a cutoff. And I was just barely 31. I was almost 32. Mm-hmm. So I had to get a job that week, and I found a guy. Yeah, really.
Well, what's great about what your story is, and then our slogan is to record the past and inspire the future, so that a younger lesbian can look at this, because you just kept on going.
Yeah.
I mean, you went from one job to another, and just the fact that you went back, I think, is a difficult thing for people to do, especially women.
Yeah.
It's very significant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he had been somebody who was a jerk, I wouldn't have. There were plenty of jerks. I met plenty of jerks during that week who had never seen a woman on a job, and they're like, "What are you going to do?" Because I'm, like at the time I was 5'2", and it was so interesting to me. It was really quite a relief because, as I said, when I was being a social worker with those kids, it's like I never knew if I was doing, if I was harming them, helping them. You just don't know.
You don't.
Well, in carpentry, it's like when I did something wrong,
it showed.
They'd say, no, that's not how it goes. And so you take it apart and you do it again. It was very concrete after being in this world of not having any idea what you're doing,
What a contrast. Right.
Yes, it was such a huge contrast. Mm-hmm. And that first job I had, boy, that was something, because they said, if there's any problem or you cause any distraction, you're the one that's going, not them.
Right. And you were still the only woman there?
Oh, yeah. I was the only woman on the job for a couple of years.
Were you in a relationship then? Did you have a lover?
Yes. Yeah.
What was she doing?
She was a social worker, the same social worker.
She's,
after I'd been working for a couple of years, I wanted to tell you about that first job. I was such an unusual. These guys would leave their jobs, and these guys were always walking by to see what I was doing. It's like, she's using a sledgehammer today. Let's go look. It's like, so I had to not look. I keep my eyes going, and
focus.
They were always willing to talk to me and explain things to me. this is the wrong hammer. I must say, got told by so many guys that I had the wrong hammer, you know. And so I
Really?
because I didn't know. And I finally said, this one guy said something. I said, you know, if I hear one more guy talk to me about my hammer, they're getting the claw in the head, you know. And they kind of stopped. You know, these guys gossip.
Good.
They gossip, you know, so word spreads really fast. They talk about women being gossips. I never heard so much as I did from the men, you know. They
I agree
gossip
with
like
that.
crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
So did they ever
anyway.
bring their wives or their daughters by to see this woman working in the
Not that I know of.
carpet?
Not
No.
not that I
Right.
know of. I just decided that I wanted to live out in the country, mostly because of my home situation was so kind of difficult, and I just sort of thought we got to get out of the city. So we bought some land for $9,000, like 25 acres. Well, it was
Wow.
really rocky, and you know, although that it had a year-long creek on it, but it was during the drought. During the drought, bad drought in the 70s.
What year was that?
77 maybe. So we ended up just driving a truck down to a certain place, and then from there shooting the lumber down.
Oh my gosh.
So so we built this house down there, the social worker and I.
Just the two of you?
Yeah, and she had a daughter, and we would get people would come out on the weekends. In fact, Chivas, we were old friends. We had been lovers in '74 for a few months. It didn't work. It didn't work, you know. And she helped out up in Willits. So that's when my social worker partner got involved with carpentry. She didn't really want to, but anyway, so we built this place, and it was just so stressful. It was really stressful to do the way we did it. We had no electricity, no generator. I cut everything by hand, you know.
So at that time you weren't working as a carpenter in the business?
No.
You were on your own.
Yeah. So it was
How long did that
extremely
take?
difficult. Probably not quite a year. So we left that place, and then another social worker had joined us, and we ended up selling the place to her when it was all built and land was bought. So not for not much money, for essentially what we put into it.
So then where did you move?
Then I moved to Berkeley.
Were you working as a carpenter then? Did you? What was your occupation?
Yeah, I was working as a carpenter because jobs were still hard to find. It wasn't, you know, people weren't exactly welcoming women on the job 2 years later, you know. So
in giving counsel to other lesbians in terms of moving from a very academic career into a totally different career in trades, what would you suggest that they do to evaluate their decision?
Well, it's probably a good decision to go into the trades. You make more money, way more money, you know, I made more money than I was making as a social worker, and I was getting paid pretty well, I thought, for the times.
Well, you know, I think for lesbians and women in general, that is a big consideration. The economics of what we're doing, and you know, your productive years are, you know, they're sort of limited in terms of jobs and job seeking.
I would advise them that they have to pick their battles. You know, if they do get into the trades, you pick your battles. You don't rise to the bait every time somebody puts something out there, and kind of focus on what you're doing, because a lot of these guys focus on what somebody else is doing. You know, somebody else isn't doing that. I'm not. Yeah. So just focus on what you're doing. You do the good job. Of course, that's any job. And I ended up working a lot of framing jobs. I didn't necessarily do a lot of framing, but I did a lot of other stuff, which means there's a lot of wood. you go on a job and you just smell wood 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30. You smell the wood, and it just, kind of get yourself all set up. It's very cool.
So, and did you participate in any of the tradeswomen?
Oh, I was really active in tradeswomen. And then I eventually, after about 10 years, got a job with the city, Recreation and Park Department. And that was really a nice job. That was great. Lots of variety. Oh my God, I did so many different things.
Now, what city was that?
San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I lived in San Francisco for 30, I can't remember, it was 34 or 35 years. So you could retire at that time. You could take an early retirement from the city at 52. So
that is early.
And you'd be covered with medical insurance for the rest of your life. I figured, okay, I'll try something else, and I wanted to be a bookseller. So I found a space, found a business partner, and we had to build it out because there was nothing. It was just sheetrock walls with taping and mudding. The store, I only had it for about 5 years.
What year did you open your store?
95.
What made you sell it?
Because I was running out of money.
What's your legacy? What would you like people to remember about you?
Oh, I think what's probably going to be put on my tombstone, there's not going to be a tombstone, but it would be, about being like the first woman carpenter. They used to, the union used to call me, like Mama, something, because I was, because I was the oldest of all of them, because the ones that came after me were much younger, of course.
And now, how many carpenters that are female?
Not much. I don't know if you talked to Molly, but the tradeswomen numbers have never gone up. They've never gone up. I mean, there's more women in the trades for sure.
Right.
But I think in terms of percentage of the population or percentage of workers, it's still very low.
So thank you.
Okay, Diane. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.